The year 1944. Deep in war-torn Europe, American tankers in their M4 Shermans faced a predator that inspired a primal kind of fear. Its name was whispered from crew to crew: Panther, a German steel beast with sloped armor that seemed to shatter their shells harmlessly, and a long-barreled gun that punched through their Shermans with terrifying ease. The Germans mocked our tanks, calling them Ronsons for how easily they lit up. They thought we were pushovers, but they overlooked something. They overlooked American ingenuity and our ability to learn from bitter mistakes. Soon, a new weapon would appear on the battlefield that would make their laughter catch in their throats. A weapon the tankers nicknamed the Blowtorch for its ability to burn through the armor of their prized big cats. This is the story of how the Sherman stopped being the prey and became the hunter. When America entered the Second World War, it needed weapons. A lot of them, and fast. The M4 Sherman tank was American industry's answer to that challenge. It wasn't the most heavily armored or the most powerful tank on the battlefield, but it had its own trump cards: incredible reliability and ease of production and maintenance. Factories churned them out by the thousands, creating a river of steel that was meant to overwhelm the Third Reich. At the heart of its design was the 75mm M3 gun. For its time, it was a versatile and perfectly adequate weapon. Its high explosive shell was magnificent against infantry, machine gun nests, and anti-tank guns. Against early German tanks like the Panzer III and IV, its armor-piercing rounds were more than effective. In North Africa, the arrival of the Shermans was a nasty surprise for the German Afrika Korps. It seemed the Allies finally had a tank that could fight the enemy on equal terms. But that euphoria wouldn't last. Normandy, summer of 1944. The hedgerows of the Bocage had turned into a deadly labyrinth. It was here, on these narrow roads and small fields, that American tankers felt the full qualitative superiority of the new German machines. The Panzer V, the Panther, was a tank from another generation. Let's dive into the technical details to understand just how serious the challenge was. The Panther's frontal hull armor was an 80mm steel plate sloped at an angle of 55 degrees. This rational sloping increased the effective armor thickness to between 130 and 140 millimeters, making it practically immune to the Sherman's 75mm gun at standard combat ranges. To penetrate that kind of protection, a Sherman crew had to get within point-blank range, which in a real battle was tantamount to suicide. The Panther's weapon, the 75mm KWK-42 gun, with a barrel length of 70 calibers, was one of the best anti-tank guns of the war. Its shell, leaving the barrel at an enormous muzzle velocity, could punch right through the Sherman's frontal armor from over a mile away. Sherman crews found themselves in a monstrous situation. They could be destroyed by an enemy they could barely see and couldn't possibly reach. German tankers, realizing their advantage, acted with boldness and aggression. They would engage from long distances, methodically picking off the American tanks, which could only fire back helplessly in response. American tactics were reduced to desperate maneuvers, trying to get around the Panther's flank or rear, where its side armor was significantly thinner, only 40 to 50 millimeters. But this required incredible coordination, luck, and often sacrifice. It frequently took the combined effort of an entire platoon of Shermans, taking losses along the way just to flank and destroy a single Panther. Back home, in the design bureaus and on the testing grounds of the United States, the problem was well understood. As early as 1942, anticipating an arms race, the Ordnance Department had begun developing a more powerful gun. The result was the 76mm M1 cannon. At first glance, a difference of 1mm seems insignificant. But, as is often the case in engineering, the devil is in the details. The main difference wasn't the caliber, but the length of the barrel and, consequently, the size of the cartridge. The M1 gun had a 52 caliber barrel. Its shell casing contained nearly twice the propellant charge compared to the 75mm gun. This allowed it to fire an M62 armor-piercing shell at a muzzle velocity of 792 meters per second, whereas the old gun's shell barely exceeded 600 meters per second. What did this mean in practice? A dramatic increase in penetrating power. While the 75mm gun struggled against 80 to 90mm of armor at 500 yards, the new 76mm M1 gun could now punch through over 110mm at the same distance. This was still not quite enough to reliably defeat the Panther's upper frontal plate, but it was enough to confidently penetrate the gun mantlet and the lower glacis. The game was starting to change. The Sherman now had a fighting chance in a duel. However, the introduction of the new gun wasn't smooth. Paradoxically, one of the reasons for the delay was the versatility of the old 75mm gun. American tank doctrine primarily assigned tanks the role of infantry support, and for that task, the powerful high-explosive shell of the 75mm was a better fit. The 76mm shell, due to its higher velocity, had to be built with thicker walls, which reduced the amount of explosive filler from 1.5 pounds to just under a pound. Command was afraid that by improving the anti-tank capabilities, they would weaken the tank in its primary role. It was only the harsh reality of combat in Normandy that forced them to accelerate mass production and shipment of Shermans with the new gun. The first M4s with 76mm guns only began arriving in significant numbers by the late summer of 1944. But the true answer to the Panther's steel wasn't just the barrel, but what came out of it. By late 1944, a new type of shell began appearing in the ammunition racks of the 76mm Shermans. This was the round that would become the Blowtorch. It was a high-velocity armor-piercing round, or HVAP, also known as the M93. The design of this projectile was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of a solid steel shot, it used a heavy and incredibly hard core made of tungsten carbide, encased in a lightweight aluminum body. All the energy from the powder charge was focused on this small but extremely dense core, which was accelerated to a fantastic velocity, over 1,030 meters per second. The effect was stunning. An HVAP round fired from the 76mm gun could penetrate the Panther's frontal glacis plate from 800 to 1,000 yards out. Now, American tankers didn't have to risk everything on a deadly flanking maneuver. They could meet the German predators head-on. The problem was that tungsten was a rare and strategic material, and HVAP rounds were always in critically short supply. By February 1945, there were, on average, only a few of these rounds available per tank. Every shot was worth its weight in gold. Picture a morning in the Ardennes, December 1944. A cold fog clings to the trees. The crew of an M4A3 76W Sherman waits in ambush. Inside the tank, it's cramped. It smells of grease and cordite. The commander, a sergeant, stares intently through his binoculars. You could cut the tension with a knife. They know that somewhere out there, in the fog, the enemy is moving. Suddenly, the radio crackles to life. "Contact! Panther at 11 o'clock! Range 1,000! The gunner smoothly traverses the turret. Here, the Sherman had a critical advantage. Its turret, equipped with an electro-hydraulic traverse, could spin a full 360 degrees in just 15 seconds. The Panther's cumbersome turret turns significantly slower. "Loading HVAP!" yells the loader, ramming the precious round into the breech. "Target acquired," the gunner reports, laying the crosshairs of his sight on the dark silhouette emerging from the fog. The commander gives the order, "Fire!" In that moment, everything came down to experience, nerve, and technology. The M93 projectile screams towards its target. It strikes the center of the Panther's upper front plate, a bright flash. The aluminum body disintegrates, and the small but lethal tungsten core, like a hot knife through butter, burns through 80 millimeters of sloped German steel. The German tankers, who just a minute ago were confident in their invulnerability, suddenly realized the rules of the game had changed. The Sherman they were used to treating as easy prey had just bared its teeth. Of course, the 76mm gun didn't turn the Sherman into an ultimate weapon. The Panther and the Tiger remained formidable opponents, but it gave American tankers something they had been desperately lacking: a chance. A chance to win in a head-on engagement. This change had an immediate effect on tactics. German tank commanders could no longer charge forward recklessly. Now, when they spotted a Sherman, they had to wonder, was it armed with the old 75mm gun, Or was it a new model with the long barrel, capable of dealing a lethal blow? That uncertainty forced them to act more cautiously, robbing them of their initiative. The Battle of Araucourt in September 1944 and the brutal fighting during the Battle of the Bulge proved that properly employed Shermans, especially the 76mm models, could effectively counter German Panzer brigades. American crews, using their tanks' superior mobility, tactical training, and numerical advantage, learned how to defeat a heavier and more powerful enemy. A post-war study by the U.S. Army's Ballistic Research Laboratory found that in some sectors, Shermans achieved a positive kill ratio against Panthers, reaching as high as 3.6 to 1. The story of the Blowtorch is more than just a story about an upgraded gun. It's a story of how American soldiers and engineers faced a mortal threat, analyzed it, found a solution, and forged it in steel. The M4 Sherman never became the best tank of World War II in a one-on-one duel, but it was part of the best system, a system of mass production, superior logistics, field repair, and most importantly, a system that could learn and adapt. The Germans laughed at the Sherman, but the laughter stopped when their best tank started to burn from the fire of a gun they had so long despised. That long barrel, the Blowtorch, became a symbol that underestimating the American soldier and American industry is a fatal mistake.